There are 5 different ways to store custom data in Entra ID, aka extend the Entra ID schema. And picking the wrong way can mean not solving your current problems. It can also block the solution to future problems. And in the worst case, it can leave your directory with a mess of undiscoverable data and prevent further extensions. By the way, my name is David Lundell of Identity Managed LLC. I've helped hundreds of organizations manage millions of identities. I've received the Microsoft MVP Award 12 times, and I wrote the first book on using Microsoft's tools for identity management. Microsoft has had a lot of chefs in the Entra ID kitchen, baking up solutions to different problems. And now we have an array of confusing choices about where to put your data. Even the one Microsoft document that's supposed to help you decide leaves out one of the 5. What are the 5? Extensions attributes 1 through 15, which are the cloud counterpart to the on-premise extension attributes, or custom attributes in Exchange Server. There are only 15 of the single-valued strings per user and 15 per device. Since these already exist, you are not truly extending the schema, you're just making use of them. But we still call them extensions. Directory extensions have been created in your tenant by various enterprise applications, such as the Tenant Schema Extension app, which is used by Entra Connect Sync and Cloud Sync to synchronize attributes from the on-premise AD that are not in or already synced to Entra ID by default. In this context, they're referred to as Entra Connect Sync directory extensions. But in general, they're just called directory extensions. But they've also been called custom extension attributes in Azure AD or custom extension attributes in Entra ID. You may not have any schema extensions in your tenant. They're more commonly used by developers, especially those who are customizing Outlook resources. Open extensions are the wild, wild west. Like schema extensions, they are more commonly used by developers, especially those who, again, are customizing Outlook resources. Open extensions are like the wild, wild west because they're used by developers without defining the schema in the directory. From an Entra ID admin point of view, this feels like building a house without making a blueprint. In reality, the developers do make a blueprint, they just don't get approval from the city, the Entra ID admin first. Finally, that brings us to custom security attributes, a more tightly controlled cousin of directory extensions and schema extensions. These are typically created through a UI in the Entra ID management portal, unlike the other 4. This brings me to my first crucial point. You are probably underutilizing custom security attributes in Entra ID, which is a shame, because there are 3 places it is the only way to solve certain problems and lock down Entra ID in Azure. We had a client who had a big management headache with their conditional access policies. You see, they needed to ensure that several conditional access policies did not get applied to dozens of enterprise apps that are used to access Azure storage. Even worse, this list grows periodically. So they would have to go back into each of these policies and manually exclude the new enterprise applications. If you have this problem too, we can solve it by creating a custom security attribute set to go on service principals, enterprise applications, and managed identities. And once we populate the attribute, we can then use a filter inside of the conditional access policy to include or exclude enterprise applications by the dozens instead of in onesie-twosies. We can further utilize this to apply conditional access policies to our enterprise applications by category. Picture this, a policy that applies to SOX applications when privileged SOX users access those apps. We could easily enforce MFA and do it more frequently than for other apps, and have tighter risk controls. Additionally, custom security attributes on users and service principals combined with resource tags or index tags on Azure resources are the only way to achieve fine-grained control over Azure resources that you can't do through Azure Role-Based Access Control on its own. This is called Azure Attribute-Based Access Control, or ABAC. RBAC is Role-Based Access Control, usually meaning a user or other security principal is assigned to a role directly or through group membership. ABAC is attribute-based access control and means the access is granted based on attributes on the user. For example, you could grant read and or write permissions to certain Azure resources, such as blobs that have an index tag, such as the final countdown, that matches a custom security attribute like project assignment on a user or enterprise application. Again, requiring that the user would have the final countdown as one of the values in their multi-valued project assignment attribute. Finally, only custom security attributes allow you to lock down data. What do I mean by that? Well, when a user, group, or service principal has access to read a resource in Entra ID, they generally have permissions to read everything on the resource. There are some minor exceptions there. When they have write permissions, they generally have permissions to write to all attributes on the resource. Again, there's some exceptions. But using custom security attributes, you can control who has permissions to write to these custom security attributes or even read them, regardless of what other permissions they have. This makes them the ideal place to store sensitive and or secure information that is needed by some of our various use cases, such as lifecycle workflow scope filters, or is used by certain applications that need to store this in the directory in Entra ID. In contrast to underusing custom security attributes, you are probably, most definitely, overutilizing extension attributes 1 through 15. And this may block you from critical solutions where you have to use them. I get it. They're already there. You're comfortable with them from the on-prem AD world, and you probably already have data in them, again, from the on-prem AD world. Or at least they're populated. Some of them are used in your on-prem AD. However, there are 3 use cases that you can only do with extension attributes. 1, only extension attributes can be used to become visible in the profile card. The profile card shows up in Teams, Outlook, and other Office apps and services. Only the online stuff. The client stuff on-prem isn't always there, like Outlook. The Outlook on desktop client doesn't show these. But for the online versions, we can take extension attributes and make them visible in that profile card. And that's only extension attributes. We can't do that with any of the others. Second, we can use custom data in membership rules for Exchange Online dynamic groups, but only with extension attributes. None of the other 4 work there. The third use case, that is the exclusive domain of extension attributes, is using conditional access filters for devices. So if you litter the extension attributes with the same stuff you have in your on-prem Active Directory, and then if you want to use it for many of the other use cases it can solve, you may not be able to use it for things that you have to use it for, like Exchange Online dynamic groups. And this is going to leave you managing those distribution groups by hand or through some other method. And maybe you'll have it populated with garbage that prevents you from putting data that you want to have appear in the profile card. For example, unbelievably, the employee type was not included in the original Entra ID schema, nor of course was it then included in the Entra ID Connect Sync defaults until June of 2023. Because of that, it wasn't configured to be used in the rules for dynamic group in Exchange Online, nor dynamic groups in Entra ID, nor dynamic membership rules for administrative units. As a result, employee type is an attribute that you may already be flowing into the extension attributes, which is great because then you can use it. If you don't already have employee type populated there, then you should. And again, the built-in employee type attribute can't be used in these scenarios. So this is a case where you're probably going to want to duplicate data. Since the extension attributes don't usually exist in the on-prem AD world for devices, you probably don't have an issue of overusing them on devices. And hence the third use case, using it for device filters and conditional access policies, is usually not blocked. Now we're going to talk about 2 of the other kinds. Schema extensions and open extensions don't really have any use cases for Entra ID administrators trying to improve security. Like we talked about before, they are quite useful when you're extending Outlook resources, contacts, messages, posts, events, to-do tasks, and to-do task lists. And when you're doing that, sometimes you may also need to store custom data on the directory resources like users, devices, groups, and organizations. There are several big differentiators between these two, between Schema extensions and Open extensions. If you need to be able to use Microsoft Graph API to filter your queries based on custom data, then between these two, you must choose Schema extensions. The other differentiators, only Open extensions can extend to-do tasks and to-do task lists. Finally, with Open extensions, there's no need to define the extension in Entra ID. You simply write the data to the resource. This leaves directory extensions as the utility player that can cover most of the vital use cases for Entra ID administrators without occupying the valuable real estate that extension attributes do. Even if your use case does not require a directory extension, if you think it might in the future, if it might be useful in one of these different use cases, you might think about doing this as a directory extension. There is one caution. You can only store 100 values in directory extensions in any one particular resource. So these do run out. What are the use cases for directory extensions? And again, almost all of these you can also fulfill with extension attributes, but because of what we're talking about, that limited space and the exclusive use cases for extension attributes, you probably shouldn't use the extension attributes. You should probably turn to directory extensions. Well, we have the group dynamic membership rule, the administrative unit dynamic membership rule, inbound cloud provisioning, cloud user app provisioning filtering, on-premise sync, cross-tenant sync, customized token claims. Yeah, there's a workaround to be able to do custom security attributes for that too. Entra ID DS, the Entra ID domain services, that does allow extension attributes and directory extensions. They're also filterable through graph queries. Azure B2C, I know that's been deprecated, but it's still in existence out there. Its replacement, external ID custom user attributes, conditional access filter on users and groups via dynamic group membership, scoping filters for lifecycle workflows, and finally, an access package assignment policies. And there may be more that I'm missing. Finding the correct place to store your custom data in Entra ID is crucial to improving security and efficiency in Entra ID without having to do mounds of manual work. To help with that, I've summarized this knowledge into a decision tree. I've included the link in the description. Finally, since I can't possibly cover every case in a decision tree, I have written 8 articles compiling and discussing the pros and cons of each approach in nuanced detail. The link to that is also included in the description.